This is Gemara Yevamos Daf Yomi. All the learning should be an incredible schos for Yochav and Miriam Abbas Chaya Pesel Chana Bas and Nechama Yisochem Devar Shalom and Levi Zava Ovi Mentali Shevim and Chaya. They should find the shidduch Agam B'Karev, as well as the shiurim Shvis Chos Yishur Selana Bas Shana Malka and Yisrael Zelik Ben Yuta Rachel, as well as the Chos Ruach Shleim Shal Yus Ben of Heidish Moment Hill Dan Avtalis B'Mech Chales and Nechama Bas Riva Vashav Vegam Sheichana B'Seich Shar Chayli Yisrael. We're holding on Yudches Amid Beis. We're approximately 15 lines at the bottom of the Amid. The first one line is a Bishlama, and we're in the middle of discussing the Shita of Rav Shimon as explained by Rav Aishia. Yesterday we learned the Mishnah, and the Mishnah, this is really piggybacking Mishnah is two sides of the coin, the first Mishnah in the parak and this Mishnah in the parak, and this is the discussion of Eishes Ach Shaloi Haya Ba'ilama, the Betur, as we'll see in a few moments, which we're going to learn out from a pasuk. So it certainly exists. What is the case of Eishes Ach Shaloi Ba'ilama? We have Reuven and we have Shimon. Reuven dies, Reuven's wife falls to Yibam, of course, to Shimon. And now the question is, right now, Shimon is waiting to do Yibam to Reuven's wife. Right now, what happens? In the first Mishnah, what happens is, now Levi's born. And then Shimon goes and does Yibam. Then Shimon dies, and everyone falls to Levi. So Levi was born when? Between Reuven's death and Shimon's Yibam. In the second Mishnah in front of us in Yudches Beis, that was not the case. The case was that after Shimon already performed Yibam, Reuven dies, his wife falls to Yibam to Shimon. Shimon does Yibam. Then Levi is born. So Levi is born into a picture seemingly of perfection. Shimon already did Yibam. Shimon is married to this woman, the ex-wife of Reuven, and still in both of these cases, the chiddush of Rav Shimon, according to Rav Aishia, what happens is that when Shimon dies, a Levi is allowed to do Yibam or Chalitza. These are not the cases of Eishes Ach Shaloi Ba'ilama. So explains the Gemara. Now we're holding 15 lines on the bottom. The first line is Bishlama. Bishlama Yavam V'achach Noilad. Our Mishnah, the second case I understand, in which Shimon does Yibam and then Levi is born. So I understand Rav Shimon's opinion. I think I said it backwards. Here it's Pashit Rav Shimon's opinion. Again, he was born into Rav Shimon's opinion because the Levi was born into perfection. Levi's born into situation. Shimon already did Yibam, so it makes a lot of sense now that when Shimon is an iftar, that Levi will be allowed to do Yibam or Chalitza to this woman because already everything was done and finished before Levi was born. But I asked the Gemara back on the first Mishnah, in the case when Levi was born and then Shimon does Yibam, so Levi comes into this world. What does he find? He finds Shimon in a situation of waiting, potentially about to do Yibam to the ex-wife of Reuven. So therefore, in that case, what is the reason in this case Rabbi Shimon holds that after Shimon's death, Levi will be allowed to do Yibam or Chalitza? Explains the Gemara what everyone is thinking, Kasavar, Yesh Zika. And not only Yesh Zika, now finally we see the extremity, how far it goes. The Machlekes, which we learned yesterday and the day before, the Machlekes, Rabbi Huna Merav and Rabbi Yehuda, Yesh Zika, and Zika says, Rabbi Shimon, you know how far it goes. Yesh Zika, the Zika Kikenusa. Not only is there some level of connection, it's as if there's a full-fledged marriage. So when Levi comes onto the scene, you know what he finds? Perfection, like our Mishnah. He finds Shimon awaiting to do Yibam to Reuven's ex-wife, to the Yevama, but the awaiting stage, that Shemeres Yavam, that's a Zika, that's a connection. Zika Kikenusa, and therefore after Shimon dies, Levi is allowed to do Yibam or Chalitza. A beautiful explanation into the Shita of Rav Aishia. He explains Rav Shimon arguing both on this Mishnah and on the previous Mishnah. Says the Heilige Gemara, Maskiv la Rav Yosef. Asks Rav Yosef, Hashta Zika Maimer Misavkil Rav Shimon. As we'll show in a minute, Rav Shimon was not sure in the case of Maimer, whether when Shimon does Maimer, Kedushin Dirabanan, Erusin, whether that is as if it's a full-fledged marriage or not. Zika lechudei mibai. Is it possible that Rav Shimon holds that only Zika is called a full-fledged marriage? And now the Gemara proves what it just said. Mai, what did we just say? It's not even in the Mishnah. Shloisha Achan is 2 and 3 brothers married. Shlosh Nashim Nachris to 3 random women. Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, and we'll say they're married to A, B, and C. A, B, and C have no relation at all. They're not sisters, they're not cousins, mothers, aunts, uncles, many things. So Reuven and Shimon and Levi married to 3 women. Umeis Echmehem and Shimon dies. Vasma Sheni Maimer. Reuven dies, excuse me. Shimon does Maimer. What's Maimer? Again, Kedushin Derabanan. Eris in the first stage of the process of marriage, specifically referring to when it is done with the case of Yibum. So Shimon does a Maimer. Umeis. Now Shimon is nifter. Now they fall to Levi. So what falls to Levi? What falls to Levi is Shimon's wife and this Maimer wife. What's the din? Says this Brisa, this Mishnah, which we actually saw yesterday. They have to do chalitza. Why do they have to do chalitza? Shenamar, because the Torah teaches them when one of them dies, you go and you sleep with the Yevama, you do Yibum. And from here we learn out Mishalez Zikas Yavam Echad, someone that has one connection, not 2 connections. That is the din of the Tana Kama. Rav Shimon argues, says Rav Shimon, says Rav Shimon, you're allowed to do Yibam to whichever one you want. And then you have to do chalitza to the second. So the first opinion holds, what do? You could do nothing. You're not allowed to do yibam or chalitza. Excuse me, you're not allowed to do yibam. You have to do chalitza because there's some tie, there's something connected that you have to sever that tie. Rav Shimon says no. Rav Shimon says you're allowed to do yibam and what? Then you just do chalitza to the other woman. Explains the Gemara, Shitas Rav Shimon. Yavumi tarvayu loy. According to Rav Shimon, why can't you do yibam to both of these women? You know why? Because the Dilma yesh Zika. Maybe there is Zika. Vavishnei Yevamos. Haba is from where? As we turn over to Yudazim now today's daf. Maybe there's Zika. If there's Zika, then what? Then Shimon is as if he married to whom? To the woman that he did Maimer to. So now when Shimon dies and his own wife and the woman he did Maimer to falls to Levi, it's as if there's 2 women falling from one man, one bias. So you can't do Yibam to both of them. Rather, says the Gemara, Yivu mechadav ifaterita. So why don't you just do Yibam to one of them, and the other one will be butter? Law, you're not allowed to do that either. Why not? The Doma ain't Zika. Perhaps Shimon is not considered as if he was connected to the woman that he did Maimer to. Perhaps the Doma ain't Zika Kikanusav, Avlishtei Avamos Abais, Mishnei Batim, and now it's 2 women falling from 2 houses, 1 woman falling from Reuven, another woman falling from Shimon. So Levi has to act upon both of them, and therefore you have to do Yibam to one and chalitza to the other. But what do we see? The sum total of this brisa is Alma. What comes out? Misaf Kalei. Rav Shimon himself is misopik. Rav Shimon himself is not sure. So we just suggested a moment ago that Rav Shimon knows that the Zika is kikenusa. This connection between the Shemeris Yavam and the woman is as if it's a full-fledged marriage. Says Gemara, I don't understand. Even in the case when they did Maimer, it's not a full-fledged marriage. Certainly not just the Zika. 4 lines down, you test them out. Perhaps he'll suggest midaraisa. Perhaps he'll suggest midaraisa hanami. So it didn't midaraisa to miyam chada v'bater chada. Really, on the daraisa level, you could just do even from one. Why? Because there's a real zika. Once there's a real zika, there's 2 women do one yiva. Umidarabanan who does it. So in the rabbanan gzer misham shamiyam rubeiz abamais habois b'shnei batim. You know why is the din derabanan? A gzeira that we're nervous, someone might not know the din. Someone might think that these 2 women are from 2 different batim. Chada miyama vidach lifter of like klum. Only one of them you do yib, and the other one you do nothing. Maybe that's the din deraisa, and it's only because of a certain derabanan that we have to do something to both women. Says the Gemara, you can't say that. Why not? Because the Brisa explained what Rav Shimon said. V'ataima de Rav Shimon. What did the Brisa, what did Rav Shimon himself explain? That the reason is Misha Maimer. Rav Shimon said, you know why? Because of Maimer, that's the concern. V'lav Maimer, the concern is whether they did Maimer or not. It's not because of a din d'Rabbanan that maybe people will think that they came from 2 different houses. How do I know it's Maimer, not Maimer? The Tanya, there's a Brisa. Amar lem Rav Shimon says, L'chachamim, im amarish al sheni Maimer, the Rav Shimon asked the Chachamim, I don't understand what's bothering you, Chachamim, allow them to get married. So says the Gemara, you see clearly within Shitas Rav Shimon, you cannot suggest it's all din daraisa. Rather, this much, and Dirabanan of concern, rather it must all be the concern daraisa. We're back to square one. How could Rav Shimon hold that Yesh Zika and Zika Kikenusa? Omar Leah Abaya says back to Rav Yosef, I have a simple explanation. When does Rav Shimon hold that Zika is Kikanusa? When does Rav Shimon hold that this connection is as if it's a marriage is by one woman, but when there's one man, but when there's two Yevamim, then not. Dilma, ki Amar Rav Shimon, when does Rav Shimon say he is din? Zika kikanusa dam yaz biyavam echad, aval b'shnei Yevamim lai. Maybe that's the differentiation that says the Gemara. What are you bothered by? You're asking me a kasha that we see in a brisa. Rav Shimon clearly is bothered that it's a maimer din. He does not hold that Zika kikanusa. He does not hold it's a full-fledged marriage. Says the Gemara, great, that's because it's two Yevamim. When it would be one Yavam, then you would agree. But says the Gemara, you can't say that. 6 lines on the white lines. Mishanoli Rav Shimon. Does Rav Shimon make this differentiation between one Yavam and two Vatanya? We learned in a brisa klalim. Rav Shimon says Rav Shimon kol shalei de kedems lenesuin lecheletzes lo misabemes nesuin kedems leleida. My love, what's going on in this brisa? Biyavam echad. It's one Yavam, and yet, what did the Brisa say? So what do we see? We see that even when there's one Yavam, not two, Rav Shimon does not consider the Zika to be absolute. If he would consider the Zika, the connection, to be 100%, then he would allow them to do Yibum. Clearly, even when there's only one brother, he does not hold that. So the Gemara is back to square one. And says Gemara, no, that's not a raya. But Shnei Yavamim, that Bryce is talking about 2 Yavamim. So we're still trying to suggest that maybe the answer for Rav Shimon is to differentiate between 1 Yavam and 2. Aval b'Yavim echad ma'ai. So says Gemara, fine. You got me. You want to differentiate. Let's go into it. Let's understand what you're suggesting in the first white line. What would the din be by 1 Yavam? So you're suggesting that the din would be that when Shimon does Yibum and then he is Nifter, then Levi could either do Chalitza or do Yibum by the brother that was born later on. If that's true, the classical Kasha, Aditani, the previous Bryce said Nesun Kodin Leleida. It's at a case where the Nesun was before the Leida. Then that's when you could do Yibum. The Bryce should have differentiated and broke it down. When is that true? So says the Gemara, that's not a good suggestion. Maybe says the Gemara, 1 second, maybe everything is talking about 2 Yevamim, but it can't be either. What does Shimon mean? That's a general rule. If it's a general rule, it means it's a case whether it's 1 Yavam and it's 2 Yevamim. The Bryce said clearly it's a klal Rav Shimon is teaching us. So therefore, we see clearly that Rav Shimon is of the opinion that when the brother is born, before the Yibum is done by Shimon, Levi is not allowed to do Yibum to her later on, whether it was 1 Yavam, whether it was 2 Yavamim, and therefore, says the Gemara, that is the end of Rav Aishia. This is Rav Aishia's explaining what Rav Shimon holds. Rav Aishia telling us that Rav Shimon holds what? Rav Shimon holds whether there was Rav Shimon holds whether the Levi was born before Shimon does Yibum, whether Levi was born after Shimon does Yibum, he's considered Eishes Achlei Ba'alamai, and, one more time, he's not considered Eishes Achlei Ba'alamai, and Levi's allowed to do Yibum or Chalitza. Says the Gemara, Rav Aishia asks on Rav Aishia, and there's, apparently what we see from over here is Rav Aishia and Reb Aishia. Over here it's Rav Aishia. Yesterday, just to zoom in for a moment, was Rav Oisha also, but we have to explain that one is Rav and one is Reb. Says the Gemara the following kasha. We have 3 brothers, 2 of them are married to 2 sisters, Aisha Obita, or the 2 of them are married to a woman and her daughter, Aisha Obasbita, a woman and her granddaughter, Aisha Obasbina, a woman and a granddaughter from her son. So we have 3 brothers married to 2 women in which there is some relationship between those 2 women, which of course right now is not a problem because 3 different people marry them, but as everyone anticipates, the problem will happen when one of the brothers is going to die, and then they're going to fall to Yibum, and there will be a relationship between the wife and the Yavama, and that's going to be a situation. Says the Brisa, what's the din? The din is that you have to do Chalitza, not Yibum. Rav Shimon Paiter. Rav Shimon says no. Rav Shimon says that you're Pater even from Chalitza. So asks Rabbi Ishya, Rav Shimon Zika Kikenusa Damya. What was the whole discussion today and the end of yesterday that Rav Shimon holds? Not only is Zika a connection, it's a connection 100%. It's Kikenusa. It's as if there's a full-fledged marriage. If Rav Shimon holds that, I don't understand, asks the Gemara. Why don't you simply do Yibam and batter up the other one? What's the problem? Once he died, it's as if there was a full-fledged marriage. Says the Gemara, Rav Amra, my poiter nami, poiter b'shniya. You know what it means? It means it's poiter from the second one, but you're right. The first one, you're allowed to do Yimur Chalitza. Says the Gemara, not so simple. Vatanya, we learned in a Brayso of Shimon poiter b'shteyem. So Amar Rava Shniya, Rava comes along, and Rava has a fascinating explanation exactly what's going on over here. Let's, at some level, try to understand this. Rava says, Shniya shebezug zeh, v'ashniya shebezug zeh kotai. Excuse me. Shniya shebezug zeh, v'ashniya shebezug zeh. Rava learns, let's just go look up 4 lines. The Gemara quoted a brayse. Gimel achem shnayim in the Suis, shtei achayos, o isha bita, o isha bas bita, o isha bas bina. Rava learned, not that there's 4 different cases over here. Rava learned that there's 2 different cases over here. And that the case involves that what's going on is that we have 4 brothers, of course, and that doesn't change. 3 brothers, Gimel Achan, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. But what's going on here is that Reuven and Shimon are married to sisters, and Reuven and Levi are married to mother and daughter. Basically, he's doubling up the cases. Or Reuven and Shimon are married to mother and daughter, and Shimon and Levi, and Reuven and Levi are married to a daughter and granddaughter. Basically, the doubles up the case. That is the simple way. We're not going to go and try to understand it. There are many pictures. I'm sorry, I don't have the picture on me. I would have liked to. But that is Rava's way of explaining it. Says the Gemara, one second. Katayi Rava Barba Zugi. Rava said that the case is with 4 pairs. That's what you're telling me? How could you say that? First of all, we have a wording issue. Chada da'ai Oy Ketani, as we would suggest. The Bryce said, Oy Shabita, Oy Shabasbita, Oy Shabasina. So how did Rava learn that that's all one case? How could that be? It sounds clearly as 4 different cases. And furthermore, asked the Gemara, Rav Shimon Poiter Bar Bata Mi Baile. What was Rav Shimon's words? Let's go up. Rav Shimon Pater B'Shteihem. Where's Rav Shimon Pater B'Shteihem? It should have said Rav Shimon Pater's in all 4. Problem number 2. Problem number 3 on Rava. That was problem number 2. There Rav Shimon said Potter. He said Potter in all 4. Problem number 3 is Rav Shimon Poiter b'shteyim in a chalitza min a yibim shenamar v'yishal chusal asikach lizar b'shashan asasar zula zula yelekuchen afilu ba'achas mehem. That it says Rav Shimon Potter from both of them that when they fall to another, there should not be a lekuchen to one of them. So what do we see? We see that Rav Shimon Potter's hold them from even a chalitza. So we're back to square one. Again, I understand that this case of Rava we did not really explain well, but says the Gemara we're back to square one. That if Rav Shimon holds that Zika is the Kenusa, then the problem is in this case, why does he not allow there to be a Yibam in the aforementioned Braisa? Elo Omer Ravashi comes on Ravashi, 10 lines on the bottom. The first one is Ba'achas. If the 2 sisters fall to the brother, one after another, Reuven dies, and then Shimon dies, you're right. What would happen? The first, Reuven's wife, you'd be allowed to Yibam, and then Shimon's wife would be an Arba. But now it makes a lot of sense. Reuven and Shimon died, boom, at the exact same moment. So what happened is that Reuven and Shimon's wives, who are sisters, by the way, or mother and daughter, mother, granddaughter, etc., fall simultaneously Liyibam to Levi. So that's the reason why you can't act in it, of course. And Rav Shimon is Avar Lak Rav Yisek Li Damar Efshel. It's something that's possible to have things happening simultaneously, and that is how we'll explain the Braisa. A bit of a doichik, bit of a difficult explanation, but now we don't have a kasha. Rav Shimon could hold the Zika Zika Kikenusa, full-fledged marriage, and to go all the way back to yesterday, Rav Aishia stands the test of time, in which he explained Rav Shimon's opinion, arguing on both our Mishnah and the previous Mishnah whether Levi was born before Shimon does Yibam or after Shimon does Yibam. Rav Shimon holds in both cases there still is not a Patur of Eshadach Shlaya Ba'ilamai. Now comes the Gemara, and this is the other opinion that we alluded to yesterday. Rav Papa Omar, 8 lines at the bottom. The first one line is Litzamtzim Yetesam and Aleph. Says Rav Papa, B'yibim v'achach noilad. Says Rav Papa, in the case when they did a Yibam and then Levi was born, that's our case from yesterday, Yud Chasam and Beis, Polyg Rav Shimon, that's where Rav Shimon says he argues, that's where Rav Shimon argues. But in the first Mishnah, says Rav Papa, Rav Shimon does not argue in that case. In that case, he says, no, Levi is not allowed to do Yibam and Chalitza. Why do we have to write both cases? We had to write both cases, each is the Chiddush of the Rabbanan, going back to yesterday that we said, why do you have to write both cases according to Rabbanan? It's Pasha. The answer is Loizu, and even this case, which Mishnah is often do. Says the Gemara, beautiful. So we have Machlekes, Rav Aishia, and Rav Papa, whether Rav Shimon argues in both cases. Tanya Kavasi, the Rav Papa, right? Rav Papa, the Rav Shimon only argues in our case. The Rav Shimon is only arguing the case when Levi is born after Shimon does Yibam, and of course the Taitzah, the ramifications of the way Rav Papa is learning that you do not have to say that Rav Shimon that Rav Shimon holds Zika is Kikinusa. Tanya Kavose, the Rav Papa, we have a raya to Rav Papa in a case that Levi is born before Shimon does Yibam, that it's going to be an Isser. We have 2 brothers, Reuven and Shimon, that are married. One of them dies without children. And Shimon gets up as that. Last is Maimer. Shimon gets up to do Maimer B'Yevimtai with the Yevamos. His big last is Maimer. He wasn't able to do it before Levi is born. And then Shimon is died. So Shimon's about to do Maimer. He doesn't get a chance, and then he is nifter. The first wife, Reuven's wife, the Yevama, is pater from Levi. Why? Because of Yishlach Shlei Ba'alamet. Levi was born into the story. Ushniya, and Shimon's wife, Oichalat says, Oy, Misya. Mess. Shimon's wife allowed to do either Yibam or Chalitza. The Brisa continues. We're going to have 4 cases in the Brisa, which the last case will be the Raya, and then we're going to go back and dissect all the cases. We'll see how far we get. Case number 2 in the Brisa. Asa ba Maimer. Let's say Shimon actually does Maimer. He does Yibam Dirabanan. And then Levi is born or Levi was born Vachos ba Maimer, and then Shimon does Maimer. Umeis, and then Shimon dies. In this case, what's the din? Harishayna, Reuven's wife, the same Patur. And the second case, and Shniya, Shimon's wife, Yibam Chalitza. Rav Shimon Aimer, and on this case, all of a sudden we have Rav Shimon, and he says, that if Levi does Bior Chalitza, then what happens, which is another way of saying Yibam or Chalitza, then it patters. What is the case? Poteres Aratza. Cholat Labailas Maimer. If he does Chalitza to Labailas Maimer, which is to Reuven's wife, to the original woman, Loi Niftarat Sarah, then it does not pater up Shimon's wife. But if he does Yimar Chalitz to Shimon's wife, then it does pater up Reuven's wife. And we're going to come back to these cases as the Brisa continues. That's a second case of the Brisa. The Brisa continues with a third case. We're on the third line, Yitesima base. Kansa Umeis. Shimon marries, does Yibam, and then Umeis. And then Shimon dies. Then Avachach Noilach. Then Levi is born. Oy Shalach Vachach Kansa. Or Levi is born, and then Shimon marries this woman, does Yibam, Umeis, and Shimon dies. Shtei Boiteres Min Chalitza, Min Yibam, both the Yevama, the original wife, and Shimon's wife are Patrim Yibam Chalitza. That is case number 3. And finally, case number 4, Konsav, Shimon marries the Yevama ben Elach, and then Levi is born. Vachar and then Shimon dies. Shteyem Peturais min Chalitza min Yibam Divri Rebbe Meir. Rav Shimon Aimer, Haylu Ba Matzah Be'eter, explaining explicitly like our Mishnah. In this case, Rav Shimon argues, since Levi is born, it's a situation that Shimon already did Yibam Umatzah Be'eter. V'layanda Alav Sha'achas B'Isr, and there wasn't a moment of time in which Shimon Shimon was out to this woman, then miyaba is a man, she years oicheles is mayam, she yertik do yimar chlitz, whichever one you want. Says the Gemara, and here is the raya from this final case. Habava de seifel aman katani la mamish, like we learned yesterday after we said the Mishnah, and after we said Rav Shimon. We said, why did the Mishnah say Rav Shimon argues here? Says the Gemara the exact same thing. Why did Rav Shimon argue here? Teaches din of Rav Meir, katani la. If we said it for the din of Rameir, Mechti, let's see. Rameir ben Yavam another ben Yavam. Does Rameir does not make a difference whether it was born and then Yibam, even then born. So therefore, Lavin of Les Ninu, the fourth case could have been written all together. So why did the Bryce of the fourth case split it up? An explicit proof to the sheet of Rav Papa that Rav Shimon only argued this case. Shimon only argues in the case of Yibam that Shimon does Yibam and then Levi is born. Levi born into a situation of perfection. Then Shimon dies. Then Levi could do Yibam or Chalitza, but not in the case that Levi is born before Shimon does Yibam, which is the original Mishnah, the way Rav Aishia, Kash and Rav Aishia, Raya to Rav Papa. And now the Gemara is going to go, and the Gemara is going to go back and dissect the Brisa. We had 4 cases in the Brisa, and let's go one at a time. Amar Mar, back to case number 1 of the Brisa. Again, we have Reuven and Shimon. Reuven is nifter. Amar Ashini lasses maimer. Biyavinto. Shimon gets up to do maimer. V'loyisbik lasses maimer. Biyavinto. Achnol ach. And Shimon is not able to do maimer. He doesn't get a chance to finish his erisin until Levi is born. Umeis Rishai Umeis. And Shimon dies. Rishayna Yaitim Shamis actually Balama Yushniya Ichletza Misavemis. And this was the case in which we saw yesterday, and when we said this yesterday, I pointed out, tomorrow we're going to discuss exactly the case. So says the Gemara, my Amad umay lo hispik. What are the words of the Brisa? Shimon got up to do Yibam, he got up to do Maimer, he got up to do Kedusha Derabanan Eiris into the Yevama, V'lo Yispik, he didn't manage. What does that mean? Says the Gemara, I don't understand. If he did Maimer, he did Maimer. You love it, lo yavid. What exactly does it mean? He tried to do it, but he didn't do it. So yesterday I said, you know what happened? He tried to do it, and boom, at that moment, Levi was born. What does that mean? He tried to do it, the Gemara is asking. I don't understand. Explains the Gemara, Ella, you know what it means? Aman midaita. He got up to do Maimer, and she agreed. She was willing to marry him to do Erisin. But she then retracted Ella Balkarcha. And he then was only able to do Balkarcha. He only was able to marry her forcefully. And what the Chiddush is, do like your Rabbi? What's Rabbi? Are you allowed to do Maimer against her will? Rabbi Yomer Kana. Rabbi says it works. Like Kana. So this Bryce that's saying it does not work is going like the Chachamim and not Rabbi. What is this mach? Like, yes, my time with the Rebbe, what does Rebbe hold? That it works. Kamar mibia diavama. Mabi diavama balkarcha. The chiddush of Yibam, I think we spoke out at the beginning, is that Yibam can even be done balkarcha. So too, av kedusha diavama balkarcha. So too, if you're doing Eris and if you're doing Maimer, says Rabbi, you could do balkarcha. V'Rabbanan say no. Kamri mi kedusha da'alma. We learn it out from the kedushin, a regular kedushin, not of Yibam. Ma kedusha da'alma in regular Eris and midaita. You're not allowed. You're not able to marry a woman against her will. Av kedusha diavama and midaita. So to the Kedusha of Yevama has to be with her consent. And now explains the Gemara, and we'll finish with this. What is the machlekes? What is the underlying machlekes? Rabbi and the Chachamim. Whether you need das, whether the woman has to consent to do Maimer, to do Kedusha Derabanan by Yibam. Marsavar mila Yevama havle melaf. Rabbi says learn Yevama from Yevama. Marsavar Derabanan mila Kedusha havle melaf. We learn Kedusha from Kedusha, not necessarily Yavam from Yavam. And that is the end of the explanation of the second case. And now we are up to the third case. I know it's a little bit high, but Amir Hashem tomorrow will pick up from Asa Ba Maimer. The Bryce is a second case, in which we'll start with from in tomorrow.